one of the most important parts of sabre fencing is your preparation. If you want to get good at sabre, you have to really start thinking about your prep. But first of all, what even is a preparation? Now let's say you want to perform some kind of action, maybe an attack or a parry riposte or whatever really. Before you launch into the action, you usually have to do something before to get yourself and your opponent in the right position for the action to work. Broadly speaking, we call that thing you do before the action your preparation. In Sabre, preparation generally refers to what the fencers do immediately after the referee gives the start command. How do they step forwards? Is it a big step, a small step, is it fast, is it slow, how many steps, etc, etc. Fencing is often described as physical chess, which is a bit silly because the mechanics of the game are nothing like chess. But maybe you can make a comparison between a preparation and a chess opening. Like with a chess opening, you want your preparation to leave plenty of different possibilities open so that you can deal with whatever your opponent throws at you. But sometimes you might sacrifice some possibilities in order to elicit a particular response from the opponent. Everybody is different and has different ways of moving, so there are infinite kinds of and variations of preparations. You can do multiple small steps, one bigger step, jumps, slide steps, whatever you feel is natural and works for you. The main thing is that you always want to start by moving forwards, even just a tiny bit. The reason for this is that in Sabre the advantage is with the person attacking, so you always want to have the possibility to attack. If you stand still or even step back and your opponent moves forwards, you are allowing them to attack without being able to attack yourself at the same time. Okay, sometimes you might want to throw a spanner in the works, but most of the time you need to move forwards. You may have heard of the rock, paper, scissors model, where both fencers kind of pick their action and fully commit to it. This can be a useful framework to begin with, but pretty quickly you will realise that any decent opponent is going to be able to react to what you are doing. Let's say you want to make your opponent fall short. If they see that you are moving back, they won't just lunge from out of distance, they will just add extra steps and transfer into a long attack. This is where we need to think about our preparation, i.e. what we do before the pull. Generally speaking, there are two kinds of preparations, reactive and proactive. Now in reality it isn't entirely black and white, there is a kind of in-between thing, but I think it's useful to think in these terms so that you have a clearer idea of what you are doing. The idea of a reactive preparation is to watch what your opponent is doing so that you can pick the appropriate counter action. Sometimes we can also call this an eyes open preparation. For these kind of preparations, it is important to be balanced and to be able to move in either direction. If you go too big and fast, it might make it hard to change direction. Going deep also gives you less time to react, since you will find yourself closer to the opponent with less room to escape. Another important thing is consistency. You want to avoid any tells or twitches which might indicate to the opponent what you are about to do. Ideally, these kind of preparations will be identical regardless of what action you will perform. With these preparations, it's important that you really watch what the opponent is doing and not just guess. But the difficulty with being so open-minded is that you might have to juggle a multitude of options in your head, which can be pretty overwhelming. It helps if you can narrow down your options beforehand. Better fencers are able to juggle more options in their head, but a lot of the time you only really need to think about 2 or even 3 potential actions. The idea of a proactive preparation is to force a particular reaction from the opponent, which you can then exploit. For example, a big preparation will draw the opponent into making an attack on prep, which you can then make miss or even parry. Basically, you prepare as if you're going to do one action and then at the last minute switch to a completely different action. It often helps if it looks like you have just made a mistake. That way the opponent is more likely to get baited. These kind of touches are really fun when they work, but they are kind of risky, so you don't want to have to rely on them. A common piece of advice that you hear is to mix things up and vary your preparations. Whilst this can sometimes be useful advice, variety just for the sake of variety isn't necessarily a good thing. You really want to have some purpose behind your preparations, so randomly switching things up isn't always a good idea. Whilst footwork is super important, you should also think about what you do with your hand. The position of your blade not only determines what targets you are going to be able to hit, but also where your opponent is likely to try and hit you. Hand feints can also be really useful for drawing responses from the opponent. Occasionally, you might want to forget about preparing completely and just launch a big step lunge attack straight off the line without any hesitation. These kind of attacks don't always have a high success rate, but they can sometimes catch an opponent off guard. And even if it doesn't work, it can put some doubt in the opponent's mind, maybe making them more likely to try and preempt your actions, to guess rather than just watching as they should be. Since every opponent is different, you can't use the exact same preparation against every single fencer. Your opponent will probably change what they are doing during the bout as well, so it's important that you are able to make subtle adjustments to the preparation, changing the rhythm, the number of steps, or even the size of the preparation. The beautiful thing about fencing is that everyone is different, and there is a freedom to experiment and find things that work for you. I think watching plenty of high-level fencing is a really good way to discover many of the different options that are available to you as a fencer. Experimenting is really fun and an important part of learning, but also at some point you're going to have to settle down and master a smaller number of preparations. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you want to support the channel, I'd really appreciate if you were to join the Patreon. It's only $3 a month, and I am slowly building a catalogue of exclusive Patreon only videos, so please check that out. Cheers, see ya.